I'm Julie Zenner along with Dennis Anderson, and here's what's coming up on Almanac North.
We're going to talk tonight about a Blandin Foundation survey of Minnesotans with opinions on topics like the economy, access to health care, and much more.
This winter has been very harsh on local roads, but MNDOT will spend the summer fixing up a lot of the highways that we travel frequently.
And Lieutenant Commander Roger Reinert of the U.S. Navy begins his journey home from Afghanistan.
These stories in the business news coming up on Almanac North. Hello and welcome to Almanac North. Thanks for watching. And Denny, I'd like to thank Michael Lagarde for filling in for me while I was gone last week.
Yeah, that's right. I had a chance to work with Mike as co-host. It was fun. I'm sure he'll do it again.
Yes, he filled in a couple of weeks ago when you were gone.
That's
and I
right.
really enjoyed it. It's good to have a nice, strong team around here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And speaking of strength, I'm going to toss it to you. Let's
All
get
right,
to our
thank
first
you.
guest.
Thank you very much, Julie. Welcome, everyone. You know, every 3 years, the Grand Rapids-based Blandin Foundation sponsors a survey of Minnesotans. This year, the Rural Pulse Survey polled more than 1,500 Minnesota residents on the economy, access to health care and child care, and much more. Now, our guest tonight will help us dig into the opinions and perceptions of people from our region and beyond. Alison Ahcan is the Communications Director for the Blandin Foundation, and Tamara Lowney is the President of the Itasca Economic Development Corporation. I want to welcome both of you for being here. Thank you very, very kindly. I know that every year they've been, or not every year, but every once in a while, every few years, they do a survey such as this. And I'm wondering if you can tell us what's the perception of the economy in the region that was sampled?
Wow. Well, actually, the Rural Pulse started specifically to see how rural Minnesotans were feeling about the economy. It was 1998. The metro areas were booming. The unemployment rate in the cities was 1.7%. The story was different outside of the seven-county metro area. It was 8.7%, I believe, in 1998. Mills were closing. The situation on the ground in rural was very different, but that's not what the headlines said. And so Blandin Foundation at that point said, we need to find out what is really happening, how people really are experiencing the economy in rural Minnesota, and that's when the Rural Pulse was born. We've been doing it about every 3 years since, and I'm really excited to say that in northeastern Minnesota especially, things are looking up for the economy. People are starting to feel the recovery finally in rural places.
That's good news here.
Yeah.
Tamara, as you look at the results of the survey, do you see that there are some issues that seem to be shared statewide in both the rural and the urban communities?
Absolutely. I think there's issues that roll over through all of our communities throughout the state. As we think about some of the issues that we have around opioid abuse, as we think about housing challenges, childcare, those are relevant in both urban and throughout our rural areas. We have similar issues, but when you try to deal with them on a rural economy basis, it's really difficult to get things done. The pockets aren't as deep, and so you have to really band together to try to get people to take care of some of those challenges.
So are there still strong differences between rural and urban?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest challenges we talked about earlier is we were really thinking about how we address some of the issues that are statewide. So for example, looking at challenges with opioid abuse or mental health, when you have healthcare facilities available for people in our rural communities, you're traveling distances of hours away, right? So if you live in Minneapolis, you might have the ability to go to a clinic within 20 minutes of your home or 10 minutes of your home. If you live in Big Fork, Minnesota, you're talking 3 hours before you can see someone that can help you with that specific challenge. And those type of issues are throughout Minnesota, not just in rural northern Minnesota, but throughout rural southern and the rest of the state as well.
In looking at some of the results, it seems like you broke it out into statewide and then different regions and even real specifically drilling down into some communities. As you look at the Arrowhead region, northeast Minnesota, anything jump out to you in terms of things that might be specific to this area or are particularly concerning trends, things like that?
Well, in terms of trends for the Northeast region, you've got to be talking about upward trends in how people are feeling about the economy. There's no doubt that the economy has driven so much of how residents of this region feel about how their community is doing, what their priorities are. So once we can get some feeling better about more control over those kinds of issues, wages is another example. Northeastern Minnesota has been lagging in terms of perception for a number of years, so it's great to see that movement so we can start to tackle other issues. Right now for Northeastern Minnesota, healthcare is the top issue in terms of community priorities.
Are you saying that people who live in this part of the state are optimistic?
They are optimistic, but they've been a little less optimistic than other regions of the state for a couple of versions of the rural pulse since back to 2013. Yeah, it's definitely shown.
How do you break that down by age? Are younger people more optimistic than, say, their parents and grandparents were?
We're not able to do that in just the region at the regional level, but when you look statewide at rural, definitely more optimism. You're seeing more optimism also by women. Actually,
Really?
the rural pulse shows a lot of strength, a lot of change in terms of the strength of opinions among women. It's kind of nice we're here, huh?
It is, it is. It's a good representation. As you think about the diversification of our region, I think that really builds upon the optimism. You know, we are a very natural resource dependent region. And when we can look at across our region and see the different industries building up, that really takes the pressure off having a mining industry or a paper industry. We've got to be able to bring up other opportunities for people with, well, good paying jobs, options for healthcare that support that economy. So Grand Rapids is a great example of that. It has a very strong cultural impact. We have a lot of people there working together to try to be more than just one specific industry or another. It takes all of those industries together to provide the kind of jobs that people are looking for. You have very challenging issues with a spouse that comes in with a great job, but then the other person can't find a good paying job, right? So those are the type of things we're trying to diversify so we can meet the needs of the workforce that we want to attract.
And you work specifically in that Grand Rapids, Itasca County area. Were there any things revealed in the survey that made you kind of perk up your ears a little bit or take note of and say, oh, we need to be doing a little bit of better job here?
We do. I think from my perspective, when we look at rural Minnesota, it's really about trying to get outside and talk to people and hear their voices. The Pulse really does that. It echoes the voices of those smaller towns, and we need to be sitting down with them at the table to talk about how we overcome the challenges. I was just telling Alison, I spent some time in the rural parts of Itasca County, just trying to hear from the mayors and the local folks about what they're hearing and how we might be able to help them. And the same things that are in the Pulse, you talk about housing, we talk about jobs that are good paying jobs. Those are things that we are trying to work on every single day in economic development. We're not just trying to attract companies that bring jobs that are paying $10 an hour. We're trying to bring living wage jobs to our region so we can really have that sustaining family life.
Are we expecting to see, do you think, fewer or more people living in this region in the next census?
Well, now you got me excited about the census. We definitely have to talk about the census. But yes, actually the Rural Pulse for the first time shows that an increased number of urban people are interested in moving to less populated rural areas than there are rural people moving to the metro. The reasons have always been different. Urban people are looking for quality of life. Rural people are looking for jobs. And for the first time, we see more rural people wanting to stay put and more urban people wanting to move. So I think, based on that, but we need that census and we need rural people to be participating in the census to make sure that we prove it.
So if you have urban people wanting to move here and rural people wanting to stay here, are the jobs keeping up with that kind of a demand, or are people still having to move to the Twin Cities because they can't find the work that they want?
You know, the interesting element of rural, what's really helping us and what we need to continue to work on is broadband, right? I have a great example of this. Well, Alison and I are both people that grew up in rural areas, left and came back. We recently hired a partner at one of our organizations that is doing the same thing. He grew up in International Falls, moved to the urban areas, and now he's coming back. His spouse works entirely online. Everything's over the phone or over the computer. So the better broadband access we have, the more likely we are to be able to overcome challenges. And because the jobs don't have to be a job in person in Itasca County, it can be, I work from my home, I commute once in a while to the cities to have meetings, and I bring this kind of lifestyle for my family. And that's what we're seeing more and more of, people that want to come home, raise their families in the same settings that they grew up in.
Sure. One of you mentioned affordable housing a few minutes ago. Is there adequate affordable housing in this region, or do we need more affordable housing?
We need more housing. I think that's the answer.
Yeah.
We need more housing. We need some affordable housing. We need some market housing. We need some single-family homes. It is truly a challenge across the board in our region, from Duluth all the way up to International Falls. We have challenges in each of these communities. Some of them are very different. Some of them are just affordable housing. Other ones are families that are looking for, not just their first family home, but the next step up, and it's not available. So we have to look at these communities individually and try to take care of the challenges that they're facing.
We only have about a minute and a half, but maybe each of you could speak to how your organizations plan to use this information so that it doesn't just wind up sitting on a shelf somewhere. You wanna go first?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's actually a great example. We try to have a lot of research pieces out there all the time. We're gathering this information now. What do you do with it? And so for us, it's about communicating to the smaller towns. These are the pieces that we're hearing from you, and let's develop some community projects around those specific items. One good example, again, in Itasca County, we have a large housing issue, just like you said.
Sure.
And so we're bringing in work with the HRAs in Itasca County, wonderful group of people. They're starting to do a study that can help support funding in the future for the different types of housing that we need. So that's where projects like this go into play.
And Blandin?
Yeah, for us, it's all about healthy rural Minnesota communities. Healthy communities are ones that are in balance. They're looking at all dimensions, all facets of the community, and that all people can be heard. That's what the Rural Pulse is, and it's all available online and for anybody to use.
Alison, Tamara, thank you very, very much. Very good discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, Lieutenant Commander Roger Reinert here, saying hello from Ahcan in Kabul, Afghanistan. And this is the week I get to start my journey home. So I've been in Afghanistan for about 9 months. I deployed on June 1st, so by the time I get home, it'll be almost a full year of deployment. Yeah, I'm pretty excited. I'm ready to head home. Proud to have taken my turn, but also it's time. So what does the journey home look like? For me as a Navy reservist, it actually involves 5 stops, and will take anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. So from Kabul, I will go to Bagram, which is another city in Afghanistan, and from there fly to Qatar, a base called El Udeid. And then from Qatar, we'll go to a base in Germany, and then from Germany to Norfolk, Virginia, and I will spend a couple weeks there, essentially being made from an active duty sailor back into a reservist, and then from Norfolk to Minneapolis, which is where my reserve center is, and then finally from Minneapolis back to Duluth. So it's been an interesting, challenging experience here, and I'll do a couple more updates as I make my way back home from a couple of those stops. But thank you to everyone who has been so supportive and encouraging, and especially to my wife. I couldn't have done this without her and without all of you. So until the next stop.
With spring weather finally here, road construction season is right around the corner. Besides Duluth's continuing Superior Street rebuild, several other significant road projects are on the docket in northeastern Minnesota. This week, the State Department of Transportation released a list of projects in our region, and here to tell us more is Duane Hill, MnDOT's District 1 engineer for northeastern Minnesota. And welcome back to the one guy who gets truly excited about road construction.
Thank you. Thank you.
Duane, this year's list of projects looks like it's a little bit shorter than it's been in the past year, but still some really important things going on.
I think number-wise, we're about normal. We have 35 active projects that will be going on this summer. The dollar value of those projects or the work that will happen this year is about $75 million, which is slightly less than we've been some of the past years. But we're going to go back up again next year, so it's kind of a chance to maybe give the public a break.
It isn't the official name of the project, but the so-called can of worms. The public's always wondering, where are we on that? What's the status?
So this summer we're going to do some work on some of the local streets in Duluth.
Get them ready?
To get them ready in advance of next year's work that's going to impact interstate traffic, and then start to impact the ramps that go to I-535 and up Highway 53.
How long of a project would that be, Duane?
So I think we'll start the work in 2020, and about 2023 is when we anticipate will be done.
Talk about some of the work that's going to be done this summer in terms of those detour routes. Are you working with the city to get all of those streets shored up?
So this summer it's going to be resurfacing on the city streets. So. That work won't necessarily need to be detoured. It'll be.
But there'll be the detours for next year.
They'll be kind of the local detours for next year. So as we start to work on the Twin Ports interchange, we know when we reduce the number of lanes on I-35 that people are going to find other routes, even if it's not the official detour. So one of the streets that we're going to be working on is Railroad Street, and we know that when we have congestion on I-35, people will exit at Garfield Avenue, go down Garfield and take Railroad Street to get to downtown, or vice versa. So that's one of the parallel routes with I-35, and it's not in very great shape right now. So MnDOT's going to put some investment in it, so it's a little bit easier for travelers to use next year.
Talk about the importance of the Twin Ports Interchange project and why this is so key to get this done.
Well, we realize that it's a huge investment to do that interchange, and as we started looking at it, we knew if we didn't push to get funding earlier, it would kind of fall in the same time frame as when we need to replace the Blandin Bridge.
Sure.
And we'd be overwhelmed with projects if we had to do both of those at the same time. So we kind of strategically tried to look for funding for Twin Ports Interchange now, so that in 2028 we can replace the Blandin Bridge and not have to have those two projects compete with each other.
When you replace that bridge, and it's still a few years out certainly, does all the superstructure come out?
Well, we know that we want to replace the truss, which is the main span, and we're trying to decide, and we'll have to go through kind of an alternative analysis process to decide, do we save some of the approach spans, or do we replace the whole thing initially? So we think there's a little bit more life left in the approach spans than the truss, but it's a matter of if we replace or leave the approach spans in place now and then have to replace them in, say, 25 or 30 years, that it's another disruption to traffic, and that has a big cost to the people that use the road, so we kind of have to factor that into that decision, and we need to work through that process.
Sure.
What are the big concerns with the bridge?
Well, it's 60 years old. It's got some corrosion in the steel. We keep monitoring the condition of the bridge. Every year we do a very thorough inspection. What we found is that since 2008, we've had to go in and do reactionary repairs to maintain the carrying capacity of the bridge so that we could have legal loads use it three times in 2008, 2012, 2016. So we're kind of concerned that in 2020 we're going to find more of this kind of corrosion, that we need to do more strengthening of the bridge, and we just don't want to have to continue to manage it that way. It would just be much better to replace it with something that's got adequate carrying capacity so that we can get all the heavy loads that come into the port to go across 535 towards Wisconsin, if that's the direction they're going, rather than having to detour around to the pond.
Duane, what is the biggest project in your district this summer?
This summer, we've got a couple of about $10 million mill and overlay projects. Those are the biggest ones that we have.
Isn't there
this
one
year.
that's 20 miles up by on the Iron Range?
There is. There's actually there's two separate projects on Highway 65 that actually are 45 miles total in length, from down by Big Sandy Lake all the way to Pengilly on 65. And there's another one that's about 20 miles on Highway 135 from Virginia all the way through by Wabick, or over by Wabick. We're not going through by Wabick, but and then up over the Continental Divide to Embarrass River. So that's a substantial one. And then another 25-mile project on Highway 6 in Koochiching County from Highway 1 up to Big Falls. So those are the three kind of the longest projects that we have. They're low-volume roads, but they're in poor condition, and we really need to upgrade the pavement on those.
Any projects that are really going to impact the tourist traffic this year?
The one that we have that's going to have the biggest impact is down at continuation of the work we did last year at Pine City. And we've got two bridges that go over I-35 that are going to be replaced this summer. And while we replace them, we'll have traffic neck down to one lane at times while we're working on the bridge overhead. So that'll have the biggest impact. And last year we worked really hard on the message that for tourists that come early, stay late, avoid traveling on Friday and Sunday afternoon, because that's when we see congestion on I-35, especially if we're down to one lane in each direction. So we want to continue that message, and we don't think it'll be as bad in northeastern Minnesota for those travelers, but statewide, there's like 6 projects on the I-35 corridor that come in this summer, so it's going to be really difficult from the Twin Cities south, or actually from the Pine County line south through the Twin Cities. And then also there's many projects on I-94 and I-90 this summer that are going to affect high volumes of traffic, and it'll be really problematic.
Another project will be passing lanes between Cook and International Falls.
Yes, that's right. So we've been working with a task force on Highway 53 to try to improve the mobility on Highway 53, and that's one of the last projects that we've got earmarked funding from when Congressman Obersar was in office remaining, and that's what we're going to be building those passing lanes with. So we'll be building 4 1-mile passing sections about every 10 miles between Orr and International Falls.
And quickly, if people need to find information, where's the best way to keep posted?
So our website, 511mn.org, is the best way to find out about traffic interruptions or what's happening with traffic.
All right.
All right, Duane Hill, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Duane. Well, it's time now for the business news from the editors at Business North. Business owners in a construction zone along Superior Street expressed concerns this week about access to their stores. Their primary concern in the affected area from Lake Avenue to 4th Avenue West is truck access along Michigan Street. Work is set to start April the 8th and continue into October, but companies located between 3rd and 4th Avenues will receive an extra few weeks before it begins. That segment of Superior Street will remain open until after Grandma's Marathon on June 22nd.
Gold Cross Ambulance has a new name, Mayo Clinic Ambulance. Gold Cross has been part of Mayo Clinic since 1994. The name change will clarify for patients and communities that Mayo provides their ambulance service. Ambulances, uniforms, and building signage will be refreshed with a design that aligns with the Mayo Clinic brand this year. Gold Cross serves several other communities in Minnesota and Wisconsin. The current staff of paramedics and EMTs will retain their jobs.
Husky Energy announced this week it will invest more than $400 million to rebuild its oil refinery in Superior, but it plans to maintain its use of hydrogen fluoride. It's a highly toxic chemical. The proximity of the hazardous chemical prompted a temporary evacuation of the city of Superior after an explosion and fires at the refinery last April. Construction will begin this fall, and the company expects to resume some operations in late 2020. The refinery will be rebuilt with the same 45,000 barrels per day capacity as it had previously. Husky said it will continue to produce asphalt, gasoline, diesel, and other fuel oils for the region. For more on these and other stories, visit businessnorth.com.
If you have a comment on our show, call now, dial 218-788-2849 to leave a message, or send an email to almanacnorth@wdse.org. And visit the WDSE website for our program schedules, news and updates about the station, and upcoming special events. And Denny, it looks like the first weekend of April is going to be a little bit wet and chilly.
I'd keep the umbrella and maybe some boots handy.
All right. All right. For Denny and the team here at Almanac North, I'm Julie Zenner. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next time.